My name is Kyle Willis, and this is Marketing from the Roosevelt Room. Welcome back to a new episode of Marketing from the Roosevelt Room. We are carrying on our series on sales as we've been covering the last few weeks, and I'm really excited to be jumping in today's topic on how to confidently sell using story behind your product or service. Our guest on the show today is Dan McCann, and I have had the privilege of getting to know Dan, been able to really learn from him how he's been incorporating story into his sales process and sales culture, and in his company being able to bring a change to the way sales representatives are able to communicate and serve their customers. So Dan, thank you so much for being here with us in the Roosevelt Room today.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome, Dan. Well, as we're talking story, let me begin by building our foundation here. From our conversations, I know that you've been in sales for over 30 years, if I have my numbers right. And I'd love to know just where your interest in career in sales began. What's the genesis of what's brought us here today?
Yeah, I like to say I was an entrepreneur at heart. I believe when I was in college, I wanted to become a lawyer. My father was an attorney. I went and interned with him, and he spent the whole summer trying to talk me out of it and give me all the reasons why I don't want to go down and become an attorney as a profession. I like to think it because he was helping me, but I think it was maybe he realized I wasn't smart enough to do that. But his guidance was, hey, there's only 2,000 hours in a year. You're only billing by hours. Go find some opportunities that you can scale, grow, and what led me down the path of finding sales as an opportunity to be able to find products, sell products, and do something that could scale easily. And knowing full well that I had entrepreneurial heart and I always wanted to start my own company. I figured anytime I got a business in trouble, if I knew how to sell, you could always sell your way out of trouble. So I figured that was a good core foundation.
Yeah, I love it. Okay. So in that foundation, we've been talking about in past podcasts here at the Roosevelt Room. We've talked about the future of sales. We've talked about some sacred cows in sales. And as we're talking here today about bringing storytelling into sales, we'd love to just have a little insights from you of what you've seen over those 30 years, maybe the last 5 to 10 years to make it more specific, of what's changed in sales in the buying process where you'd say storytelling is now more important than ever.
It's funny you brought up the buying process, right? Because I think early on, 30 years ago, and I guess I'm old at this point, but I always struggled. I never wanted to be a pitch sales guy. I never wanted to be a product sales guy. I didn't want to go into a meeting and tell everyone, here's all my great things, so you need to buy it. It was just, I always just felt that was wrong, right? Early on. So I always had this inclination of trying to sell solutions and identify what people cared about. Like, why do you want to buy my stuff, right? Whatever I'm selling, from corporate travel to sales training to enablement to, printing and lithography, it didn't matter. But why did it matter to them, right? And so that was always important to me. And over the last 5 to 10 years, I think that's the biggest change, right? And you look at, social media, the internet, what they've brought. I think the buyer's journey is really the biggest change that I've seen.
Yeah.
And really identifying that buyer's journey and how well educated they are, how much they know about the product solutions and their problems, when they interact with a sales rep. And I think the biggest difference in the 5-10 years is that buyer's journey.
So is it more that you're seeing in the buyer's journey that they're more educated, more experienced, or more questionable, have more doubts? What about the buyer's journey would you say is different, or that the sales rep has to be more prepared for?
Yeah, I think they're more educated, right? Going on the internet, going to Google to ask whatever question they have about a business problem. It does force businesses and selling organizations to align their content and context back to, what the buyers are looking for. But what I think, Kyle, what I think is the coolest part about this is you're now having, buyers who are coming to those conversations looking to engage you on their challenges and their business problems. So no longer, like I didn't enjoy pitching a product, right? I also
Yeah.
didn't enjoy walking into a sales meeting and someone going, okay, give me your pitch. What? Give me your pitch. Right. And I, early on in my sales career, that's what happened. And, it took a lot of effort to spin that from give me your best pitch or your elevator pitch and, being able to probe and ask some questions and really align with them. It was so much more difficult back then. Now buyers are coming in and saying, no, Dan, I know what you do. I looked it up. I saw SimTrain. I understand what frontline selling is. I understand you. Let's talk about the business problems you guys are solving. And I want to share with you ours and see if you can align. It's a much more engaging dialogue today. And it forces sellers to be more in tune with their buyer's needs and being able to align to the buyer more effectively. And I know you said, hey, let's talk a little bit about story today.
Yeah.
And there's two types of stories, Kyle, right? There's the story that says, hey, Kyle, enough about me. Why don't you tell me about me? Or let me tell you a story about me versus let me tell you a story about my customers. Let me tell you a story about, their struggles, what they were looking to do. Let me tell you a story about what these folks are doing now. And if you're putting the right emphasis in the story on the customer, on those business problems that they have and how they're solving them, it makes it way more enjoyable to talk to new prospects because you're now talking about their language instead of forcing some awkward language about Dan McCann down their throat. And nobody cares. It just, seriously, no one cares.
I certainly resonate with that. I think as we work with our agency and in that sales process as well, there's a high level of skepticism and I think of what we do in digital marketing. Unfortunately, our industry has kind of become like the new used car salesman. Everyone out there is offering some course or some get rich quick scheme, it feels like. So when you hear, oh, you do SEO, you do advertising, you do web design, people have this unwarranted skepticism because they feel like, it's everyone else and their mother's doing that. I could have my 12-year-old niece do my social media. But the aspect you're talking about of understanding, basically building trust in the relationship, in the buyer's journey is what we've seen open those doors to then people say, okay, I'm willing to have a conversation with you now. Let me tell you my story. Let me tell you my problem and see if you can be that knight in shining armor or not.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I look at it, from my perspective, how you and I got to, meet each other and got to know each other. Right. And that was from marketing from the Roosevelt Room. Right. And in those conversations, I asked, hey, tell me a little bit more about, what you do, about no to the quo, right? The status quo and what that business is all about. And it was like, just a natural, transition, if you will, to get to better know you, but the things that you do for customers, because, and even prospects. And so the time that you spend with marketing from the Roosevelt Room, it helps your customers, it helps your future prospects, but it helps other people in the marketplace get a better concept and idea of what's important to them as it relates to, their digital content, their media, the things that your core business no to the quo does. Marketing from the Roosevelt Room supports that and helps that. I was very intrigued and interested to get to know you better because of your journey and how you go to market. From that perspective, and by the way, I'm 2 years into a new startup after a 30-year, career in sales and 15, 17 years actually running a business. And I'm 2 years in. So I'm going down that same journey as you are. And learning from each other, I think, is just the best way to do it, collaborate and better understand how people are being successful at providing better content, better context to conversations and what they're delivering. It was one of the things that, kind of drew me to to you and
Well,
your
thank
journey.
you. I'm honored to hear that, Dan. Thank you very much. And I think that's, as we connected, I think one of the things I got excited about, and I'm going to get ahead of myself here. We're going to come back to this foundation of telling story, what goes into it. But I think I want to reciprocate what you're sharing. I think one of the things I loved is I got into getting to know you, getting to know SimTrain, the company you started a couple of years ago, that you saw an opportunity in the sales culture today. You saw an opportunity that there was a need for real-time problem solving, that there wasn't another provider out there in the sales culture giving what you needed. And I think, as I've learned a little bit about you, that SimTrain was a spinoff of a company you still own and advise with called Frontline, for our listeners' sake. But Frontline provided sales enablement software, and let me know if my memory is off on this, or from what I understand about Frontline.
Sure.
But it was
Yep.
sales enablement software and services for C-level, and you saw, okay, this is great, it's working really well. I mean, tell me what it's about. Almost 20 years that you've been with Frontline, that you started Frontline and been advising them now. Is that right?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, about almost 20 years.
Almost 20
Exactly.
years.
Yep.
So in those 20 years, though, you said this is great, I love it, but it's not enough. There's a greater opportunity here, and there's a real struggle with being able to scale sales and organizational talent. And that's what led you to say, okay, there's something out there I need to create, and that's where SimTrain was birthed out of. So walk me through that foundation. Walk me through what that mindset was like for you, what that process was like for you, and then, of course, what SimTrain is doing today to be able to scale sales organizations and improve talent.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if the thought process ever, was at some point, hey, this isn't enough, right?
Okay.
In terms of what Frontline was doing. And Frontline continues to do outbound prospecting and having a software to enable customers to be more effective at prospecting and social, and leveraging social in their prospecting activities. But in that journey, right, I was the COO. I drew the short straw. Myself and my partner were both, sales background guys.
No.
And, I drew the straw that said, hey, you make all this stuff work. I'll just go sell it. I was like, oh, okay, fine. I'll figure this stuff out. Right. So, as we were doing that and as we were growing the business and scaling, we ran into trouble. I mean, challenges, if you will, right? I mean, the quality of what we did between, sales rep 12 and sales rep 20, there was a distinct difference, right? And onboarding those folks and growing from 20 to 50, it just became, as an organization grows and expands, it's harder to reinforce and drive repetition and get skills to where they needed to be. And again, as the COO, it was my job to try everything, right? I hired, expensive salespeople. I revamped our training every other year, if you will. I tried things like increasing transparency to the organization and culture. And I even tried the other side, forcing policy. How do I get folks to be confident, to be competent, to roll through what they need to do to deliver the quality expectations that we were setting with our customers, for all our new hires, right? And so over time, we realized that we had this little tool that we were using that was just kind of recording and playing back the sales conversation for our inside sales reps. And then we started building some automated scoring into it, which is something I loved, because then I could put my coaches back on the phones and didn't have them needing to work with the new hires. So the mechanism would kind of score it and give instant feedback to our new hires. And we were getting really good results, great feedback from the new hires, like, hey, I love getting through this repetition, I'm getting hands feel it, and it's really helping me. And, one of the things I didn't share with you when I was told by my father I wasn't smart enough to be an attorney, so go sell. I always wanted to coach. I always wanted to be a teacher. I always wanted to, help people grow. And so for me, it kind of always hit this spot, right? It's like, oh my goodness, we're kind of figuring something out here. And we reached out to our partners and, some of our advisors and say, hey, how do we make this better? What do we do that's more? And kind of the feedback coming back to us like, well, wait a minute, what are you doing? So you're able to combine the conversation with the CRM or the desktop and recreate those selling situations for your, like, we haven't seen anything like that. I was like, wait, really?
Huh.
So we were learning that there was a need in the marketplace, right?
Yeah.
And so for us, we got really excited about that. And so, it was kind of like the market drew us in, right? Still love what, the folks at what we're doing at Frontline and the service we provide. But, the market was saying, hey, we can use this. What about us? Can you sell this to us? And it didn't align perfectly, right? Because, who needs that? Inside sales teams of 500, 5,000, or even 10, 15, right? So, and those organizations. So we spun it off and went to market and said, yeah, we definitely think, companies can benefit from this. And we're seeing a lot of success early on. So it is more a pursuit of passion, Kyle, if you will.
Well, I love the passion is met by the need in the marketplace. You saw that need and you had a passion to be able to not only explore it, but build a solution to it. And first off, it was an internal product. It wasn't like, oh, we're going to build this just to sell it. But it was, no, this was a passion project. This is what we're already doing internally. So now how do we create this for the market? How do we create this for other salespeople who want that opportunity, that feedback? So in that though, I love to now dig in a little bit about, who talked to where SimTrain is, how this grew out of Frontline, the need to be able to provide real-time feedback and to scale your sales team. What role does the storytelling play in this? What role do you see? And you talk about being able to join the customer's journey, being able to understand their needs when Frontline was poised with this challenge of how to scale. Where did you see SimTrain is going to be able to serve the market, and it's going to be being able to provide that feedback, provide that analysis into the buyer's journey?
Yeah, no, I think, as it relates to, the buyer's journey, being able to provide that feedback. I mean, and without getting into features and functionality of SimTrain, because that defeats the whole purpose of telling the story, sure. Right? Is just being able to have a mechanism, a system, right, that has some, conversational AI built in that does that automatic scoring. It provides a safe environment for a sales rep, right? And what's kind of cool is I'm now a sales rep, right? After 30 years of selling and being a COO and owner of a company, and even though I'm the CEO of SimTrain, I'm out selling it every day, right? And what's really cool is everyone that works at SimTrain is out selling SimTrain, because what we're doing is we're just telling prospects what our customer stories are and what our customers are doing. So it's almost like fun. If you pull that away from anyone at SimTrain and say, oh, you're no longer going to sell, I think they'd be really upset, because they're like, no, I want to keep telling these stories. I want to share the success, right? The success that our customers are having with new folks and new people. So I think that, where it fits in, right, is being able to let somebody, like myself, right? I struggle, right, early on. Like, oh, how do I get this over? How do I perfect the story? How do I work through it and do it? And so, having this environment where I could go in and sit in and speak to a computer and have the computer speaking back to me and engaging in that dialogue, and then scoring me and telling me, hey, Dan, you didn't do so good in these areas, and I can go back and listen to myself. It's almost like I'm not being judged by somebody, right? So I get through it, I get repetition, it makes me feel good. The same way someone coming right out of college needs the same thing, right? So there's really no difference between someone with 30 years of experience or no experience whatsoever. And I think that's the coolest part about what SimTrain provides to our customers, is that safe environment, that sandbox, if you will. Go play, go test some things out, go get a feel for how you need to deliver the message. So it becomes yours, right? And it's your message, not just some words on a page that you need to read to somebody. That's the worst delivery of a sales story.
I like
Does that make sense?
Absolutely, because I think that's been one of my questions I have about the sales story of whose job is it to craft that story? Is it the owner of the company, the sales manager, the SDR themselves? What is that? Where does that story originate? And is it one story that should be incorporated to every conversation, or does the story get adjusted to the buyer you're talking to?
Yeah, I think any good story, right? If you watch a movie, read a good book, even on TV, there's the story's the story, right? And again, if our story was about SimTrain or if it was about Frontline, it becomes boring, right? It's like, yeah, it's great, but because our story is about our customers and our customer, right? It's one story that everyone gets to tell. But when I come into a company, right, and as the founder of SimTrain and creating that discussion around the challenges that I had, right, and then the same challenges that our customers have, and how they're solving those, and what they're doing to solve for that, and the benefits they're getting, right, going through faster repetition, instant feedback, those types of things, speed to proficiency, and the ROI behind it, and that being able to save $10,000-$15,000 per new hire
Wow.
by deploying this sort of technology. It becomes one centralized story that everyone gets to tell, and they get to tell it differently because as much as the story could be great, but if you handle it rote and you're trying to tell Dan McCann's story, Kyle, it's just not as believable as when it's Kyle's story, right? It's because you're telling it. It's from your perspective, like why the Roosevelt Room, right? You have your reason, but I also have my reason why I think the Roosevelt marketing from the Roosevelt Room is pretty cool. And I told it on this discussion today from my point of view.
Yeah.
But it should be pretty similar to your story because it's what you told me. It's the reason you set it up in the first place, right? So it's the same story, but it's just told by a different narrator. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's what I love and what you're having to say here is that aspect of, all right, it's one thing for me to tell you, hey, Dan, here's my story. Here's why I started Roosevelt Room. Here's why I started No to the Quo. Here's what I can do for your business. But when then I can get you to buy into my story and make it become part of your story, you're not selling yourself on whatever we may have to offer. And I think that's what I'm picking up in what you're saying of a good storyteller helps the buyer become part of their own story and seeing their role in being able to, whatever the product or service is going to be able to solve their problems and help them save the damsel in distress.
Absolutely. And I've been at trade shows, right, where I've talked to people and, asked them about themselves and what they're doing. And they ask me, and I'll ask them some questions, right? And so, I tell them, hey, we're doing some pretty cool stuff with conversational AI, tying that to the desktop in order to improve performance, right? Speed to proficiency and onboard faster. Have you guys done anything in that area? Like, what are you doing? And then getting them to talk and then integrating my value proposition into that discussion around, the types of challenges that clients resolve, right? With, the consistency, the reinforcement, the ability to give people the ability to know that they can be effective in their job and that confidence. And when people get excited about it and sitting there in the same trade show where someone I just met 5 minutes ago tells somebody, hey, you know what Dan does? And they tell my story to them.
Yeah.
It's because it's not just my story. It's a story about what customers are doing to become more effective. Right. And I think in fairness, because you're always adding new customers, the story evolves over time, right? Like right now, you have a series right now on sales, right? And so that's what marketing from the Roosevelt Room's doing today. But that migrates over time as you start seeing new things and customers are getting more value from it, and it aligns to your other business No to the Quo, right? It's just the story evolves and it doesn't change. You're not doing new things, but you're just adding more value. You're adding more customers, and customers bring a ton of value as well to, hey, can you do this? And they start impacting the product roadmap. They start impacting the story. They start impacting the culture and the people that work for you because they get excited about the fact that the story that you're telling is about the customer.
Yeah.
And then the customer interacts. It just makes it fun to get up and go to work every day with that. And I don't think that's asking a whole lot.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, one thing I love to make really practical about what you're saying here that I'm pulling out is being able to bring the buyer into the sales process really starts by asking good questions. insights and being able to help them see, you talked about, okay, what we're doing with this technology, with that type of service. What are you guys currently doing with it? Would love to know, because I think asking good questions is so much part of where the story originates, and it's what helps build that second and third level to the story. Would love to have any insights you have on what are the good questions to ask. If they're bad questions, you'd say, look, salespeople, we need to stop asking these questions. But here's really how you get to the heart of understanding your buyer's needs and then bringing them into the story behind your product or service. I know I'm kind of throwing this long-winded question at you, but is there a simple way that you could say, foundational ways to ask good questions?
Yeah, absolutely. Think about what we're talking about too, right? So there's a lot of terms that are being thrown around right now, like account-based marketing, account-based selling, account-based prospecting, right? It's like, how do you pinpoint in a specific account, a specific persona and role? How do you pinpoint the types of things that they need? Well, it's understanding your customers, right? And so the types of questions that are really good questions are the ones that tie back to my current customers, right? So, for example, right, if I'm talking to somebody in sales leadership, right? And so, hey, so a lot of the sales leaders that we're working with are telling us X. Is that something you're challenged with, or do you have other challenges that are more important or higher priority to you, right? And so you're bringing context into the question. So if you come to me and just checklist, right? What's your challenges? What's your problems? What's your initiatives, goals for the year, eventually it's like, okay, Kyle, why are you asking me this stuff, right? It doesn't even make sense to me. I mean, I get it. I've read the book on spin selling. I've read, the book on, questions and probing. I understand account base, right? It's like, but why are you asking me this, right? A good question has context tied to it, right? A good question aligns to, what's important to me as a VP of sales, or what's important to me. I'm running operations for a service team. Just don't ask me, hey, what are my top three, what keeps me up at night, top three things, and blah, blah, blah. It's not going to take me before 2 or 3 questions that you ask me that there's no context behind, before I'm just going to get frustrated and bored. And so, what's worse than that is you telling me everything about Kyle, but then it's like, all of a sudden it's like, now I got a question. Why are you asking me? Do you even know? Or are you just waiting to tell me everything about Kyle, but that would be awkward. So you want to ask me a couple questions first and then tell me about Kyle, right?
Yeah.
So a good question has context. A good question aligns to the types of things that, whether you know me or don't know me, you know what I do, my role, the things that your customers do with folks and personas that have similar roles. So bring that into the question, bring it into the dialogue, and then all of a sudden we can have a conversation about the types of things I am interested in, I am focused on. And what happens there is I start to build trust with you. And by doing that, I'm going to open up a little bit more, and I'm going to feel more comfortable, because I feel as though this guy has some credibility. He kind of spent some time understanding, if not me, his own customers. So I like him. I'm going to share more. I'm going to see what he truly can do for me, and I'll feel comfortable being more open by putting context into the question. I think that's the key to how you phrase things and how you ask.
Yeah. So let me take it one level deeper, because I think what you're talking about comfortability, I love that. And I want to know, in those conversations or conversation, as my question will allude to, can you build that level of comfortability and confidence, is what I was trying to ask. Can you build that in the initial call, or in your perspective, does it take a little bit more time to develop the type of trust with a potential client?
So, I mean, trust is a funny thing, right? It's trust and respect. I think it comes quickly, right? And it comes through the way you interact, right? For example, you can have someone who's highly confident and who's really conceited, and they talk about themselves and they're braggarts just in your personal life. It doesn't take you too long to say, yeah, that's great. This guy's well accomplished, and apparently they really enjoy hanging out with themselves. So I'd rather them do that than me, because it's painful for me to have to listen to these people, right? So, I mean, you see the things that you do in personal life, and we have, one of our core values is business is personal, right? Because I always hated when people said, hey, it's not personal, it's business. Well, I'm a person that you do business with, and I'm a human being, so it's kind of personal to me,
Yeah, definitely.
especially if you're trying to, right? If you're trying to trick me or talk at me instead of with me, right? And it's like, so that's one of our 4 core values anyway. So it's my point to you is I think it's kind of easy to build trust on the first call, right? To build confidence with somebody because of how you interact with them, right? It's not that hard to pick up on all this person wants to do. And especially from my perspective, because I spent 30 years, not just in sales, but also sales enablement and sales training. If I see somebody who's young and green and they're talking at me or asking questions that I don't think they understand, I'll kind of guide them and coach them if you could to maybe how to make to make adjustments. Hey, are you asking me this? Are you trying to figure out that?
Yeah.
And if they can't pick up on what I'm doing, then I'm not interested. I'll move on. And but at the end of the day, I don't think it takes more than, and again, elevator pitch, 30 seconds. Can you build trust? No, right? But if your elevator pitch has the right angle to it, so I'm intrigued to ask a question or 2 more, and you get a few minutes with me, and within a few minutes, I understand that you're all about your customers, and you're all about, the types of, challenges that you're helping the personas that you think might be similar to mine are doing, and I can see that you're genuine behind it, then you're building trust with me from word number 1.
I love that. And so let me make the transition here without trying to disguise it in any way, because I think what you're talking about, you've mastered this ability, and you certainly didn't do that overnight, but you've created a platform to help others be able to master that ability to guide the buyer to understand as a seller where they're missing the mark and where the buyer may be guiding them, like you alluded to a moment ago. And you created a AI type platform that gives this real world experience to know how to improve through SimTrain. So I know we talked a little bit about SimTrain in a moment. We'd love to have you share anything more about us. If you also said that some of the, this is where I'd love you to sell me on it, sell our listeners on it, because I think this is revolutionizing the way the way sales representatives are getting real-time feedback. And as you said earlier, if I caught it right, it's about $10,000 to $15,000 per sales rep that you're saving businesses from having the churn that they normally go through.
Oh yeah. So real quick on that one, we were talking to folks, when before we decided to do this as a business, and we started reaching out to our kind of our network, right? That safety zone that we had developed over time. And we started sharing our data and saying, hey, we're calculating like 10 grand or up to 15,000 in savings per new hire. And they looked at our calculation like, yeah, but you're not factoring in your opportunity costs. We're actually thinking you might be light. And that's when we realized like, oh, wait a minute, I think there's a business here, right? 10 grand is a lot of money to save on a new hire. 15 grand's obviously 50% more. But when folks are telling you like, hey, what about the opportunity cost of getting someone up to speed over a 6 months, 12-month period and having to restart that from the beginning, you could be talking 6 figures per, right?
Wow.
I would never share that. It's not a number I would ever go to the market and say, oh, so we're going to save you 6 figures per new hire. It's like, then I'd be like instant non-credibility there. But some folks calculate it that way based on how they view their opportunity costs and how long it takes them to onboard, their employees and the impact attrition has on their business. I spend a lot of time, because this is my new world, right? Scaling talent, helping customers develop people and their people. So, assessing this and analyzing it is there is some validity in some of these measures around the opportunity cost. The real dollars are, tied closer to that 10 to 15K, but the opportunity cost is much greater because then there's these other subjective measures around impact on culture, impact on the rest of your employees, on turnover. And if you're starting to do the right things that are more employee focused, how much impact does that have on your current customers
Yeah.
and your customer experience and satisfaction? So you could take this pretty far, but again, hard dollars, yeah, 10, 15K, but all exciting topics that I get very intrigued by the whole gamut from the hard dollars through, what our COO calls our blue dollars, right?
Yeah.
Which are, based on the logo, the soft costs are the blue dollars that, are more, they're definitely real money, and there's a huge impact there. But so it's just a way of how you calculate and factor in that value. So as just a long-winded way of saying, yeah, there's even more to it than just the 10 to 15, hard dollar, return.
Wow. Okay. And I know we talked about it a little bit at the middle of our conversation here, but just to kind of bring it full circle again, walk me through what is it that SimTrain is providing to be able to help save the 10 to 15, if not higher dollars. And then as a follow-up to that, how can people follow up with you to learn more about SimTrain?
Yeah. So a few things, right? And I appreciate the pseudo plug there, but what we're doing with customers is we're providing them a platform to build customized and personalized simulations based on any sort of prospect or customer interaction. Right. And so they're able to quickly build in a matter of minutes, a recreation of a prospecting call or a sales call or a customer support call, no matter how simple or how complex. They're recreating those and building them in a simulated environment. So they're pre-hires, and they can do performance-based assessments before you ever hire somebody with simulation and SimTrain, to onboarding and new hires, right? And being able to put these individuals into the situations that align to what you're teaching them. It's like, we're totally transforming how people learn and how employees learn. So, where it used to be instructor led and you'd sit down for 2 weeks or sometimes, God forbid, a month or two and just be told, 10 years ago, here's all the things you have to do. And it's like, okay, great. Now, when do I go do that? How do I know that I picked up on it, right? The doorway effect. I think the doorway effect says, I think you lose about 80% of what you learned as soon as you walk through the door, right?
Wow. Yep.
So so 2 months worth of activity, I picked up about a week's worth of value or a week's worth of value out of that. And then I got to learn on the job. Right. And then we migrate to computer-based training and CBT. And it's like, okay, so we're doing the same thing. It's like a talking head who's telling us, here's the things you need to know, Dan. But by the way, you can do this on your own time. You don't have to sit in a classroom and have the instructor tell you. On your own time, you can log in and have this computerized, talking head tell you, right? And so we're saving our customers from that, because you still need to convey content, and talking heads and instructors, they're really important. But if you're telling me to do something and then you're saying, oh, Dan, go watch Kyle because he's really good at this.
Yeah.
So you told me what to do. You told me what to do, and then I get to watch Kyle do it. And then all of a sudden, eventually I'm going to turn to you and go, well, what about me?
Yeah.
What do you mean? But how do I know if I can do it? You'll figure it out when you get on the floor, and your managers will watch you. And we got this kind of transition period, and it all come full circle. In about month 2 or 3, you'll have this aha moment, and you'll really just figure it all out, right? Instead, what SimTrain does is says, well, go do it, right? I told you what to do. You watch Kyle. Now you do it. When? Now. Oh, whoa, I'm a little scared. I'm a little nervous. So go in the corner and do it there. Our customers get to practice exactly what they're learning the instant they're learning it, or within 5 minutes of learning it, and get to deploy it in a simulated situation on how to become effective. And they're not going to be awesome in the first time through or the second time through, but I guarantee you at the end of week 1, when you're practicing and you're getting reinforcement and instant feedback on the types of things you're being told to do, and you're getting this hands-on experience of how to do it with SimTrain, our customers love it. And I mentioned earlier, it doesn't matter if you're fresh out of college and and you're green and you got no experience, or you got 30 years experience, right? And it's like, go do it. Okay, good. And so all of a sudden, what's happening? I'm building confidence. I'm getting it. I'm reinforcing it. And our customers build some of the coolest content you could imagine in how they pull systems and some video and conversation into one situation. and recreate some really cool stuff. So I can do crazy complex stuff or really simple stuff, right? And I get that opportunity to go through it. I get to listen to myself. I get instant scoring. I mean, our customers, not only do they get the scoring on the content, on what they're saying, but they get the sentiment scores on the customer experience they're delivering, right? And I'm a guy from the Northeast originally. I live in Atlanta now, but I get very emotional in my dialogue and my conversation, and I'm like, oh, that's awesome. People know I'm passionate about, what I'm saying. It's like, no, Dan, what you don't understand is oftentimes people get scared of you because of your passion behind your voice, right?
Yeah.
And SimTrain will tell you that, right? It'll tell you, hey, you from an enthusiasm perspective, you're going over the meter here, and you might be going too much, and you get that feedback. Yeah, so your managers don't have to tell you, hey, Dan from the north, you're in the southeast now. You got to make some adjustments to how you deliver, right? So those are all the areas of where our customers are seeing value and what they're doing, and I believe we're saving new hires and saving folks from their fear and anxiety of getting on the floor and having to learn in customer scenarios and learn real time. And then we're saving our clients too, because you don't want Dan learning on your customers, right? You want Dan learning in a simulated environment. So when he gets live with a customer, he's not going to make a negative impact on your most valuable asset, or by the way, your two most valuable assets, your employee and your customer.
I love that. And I can see now in the way you've set that up, not only is it saving money and being able to train your staff better, but I imagine that increasing sales as well, because you're improving their effectiveness.
And in some cases, and these are some crazy numbers, like cutting training time, not just in half, but 70%, right? Wow. And not just training time, like, oh, we're done with training, but actually where somebody's competent, they have the confidence, and they can actually be effective at building real sales pipeline or whatever their job, responsibility is. They're being productive, proficient, effective, and even efficient in their role coming out of training because they have so much repetition, right? You think about poker. You watch what's the poker tournament every year that they're doing? Yeah, absolutely, right. And they win tens of millions of dollars now, right? Yeah. Like 10 years ago, I think first prize was like $800,000. Now it's like 12 million.
Wow.
And if you look at the final table, it's all guys under 25, right? Under 30. Because those are the people who are getting millions of repetitions at poker hands, right? Where guys my age, it's like, I'll go play in a live game around the corner and I think I'm good until I go face one of these kids, right? Or one of these people who do online poker, and they just destroy me. It's like, I literally don't have any idea. I just won my 4 games in a row last 4 months in my neighborhood. And then I'll go to Vegas and I'll sit down and boom, 200, 400, 500 bucks, whatever I'm putting on the table's gone, as quick as I sit down. Because these guys, they know everything. It's like, they know every single situation because they've run through it.
Yep.
And that's what it's similar. That's what SimTrain's doing for our clients with their employees, giving them those situations to run through, practice, and perfect, in order to become more effective employees.
And I get that this is a reach, but I think that, kind of bring correlation. I love what you're saying of that repetition. I think about famous comedians or some of our greatest storytellers today, and those who write the books and those who write the movie plays, the amount of repetitions they had to go through to be able to get to the level of seniority and popularity they have there. It wasn't very, very few times do you sit down and write a book and become a New York Times bestseller. You've had to write probably 5 different stories until someone actually says, wow, I actually give a damn. This is something I want to read. And so that aspect of being able to get the repetitions in writing stories and telling a joke, like, the most comedians, they have a story in their routine that they're trying to carry. And in here, the sales that we're talking about, the story process, SimTrain's giving that opportunity to get the repetition and being able to ask the right questions to help tell the story behind their product or service.
Absolutely. Right. And you watch some of the best comedians out there, and sure, their jokes are funny, but some of the bad comedians' jokes are funny. The difference between the two are the ones in how they command the room.
Yeah.
Right. And how they deal with hecklers. It's like, how did they do that? And oftentimes they have like a set way that they'll deal with certain hecklers, and there might be a half a dozen ways. Right. And then they work from that. And then it's like, okay, so I've mastered the story. I've mastered the repetition of my story. Now I'm starting to master the room. Now I'm starting to master the hecklers. Now I'm becoming more real, more human in my delivery. And I don't know about you, especially because a lot of stuff's moving to bots and automation around a lot of the repetition of the early stage of sales activities, right? Or anything, service, sales.
Sure.
You know, I can get automation around what I'm doing. Okay, cool. So by the time I get with a sales rep, right, I have a very high expectation of that sales rep, because I've already, not only have I done all my research and I'm like 70% or 65% through my buyer's journey already, and I know your company, but then if I'm getting a lot of this data through automation and I'm interacting with bots that are within your org, your peer is a bot, right? By the time I engage with you, my expectation of what's coming from you is so much higher today than it was just 5 years ago.
Sure.
Right. And so you have to be so much better. It puts a lot more pressure on you. You can't ask me those stupid questions I was talking about before. Tell me what keeps you up at night. Tell me your journey. What's all this? Like, dude, Dan, I've been through that with your bot 2 weeks ago. I've already researched all this stuff. You asked me to submit forms, blah, blah, blah. You know, why don't you start telling me what you guys can do for me, right? In my world, in my environment. It's like, whoa, the expectations is so much greater, and the requirements are so much higher on professional sellers today than it was 5, 10, 20 years ago. That it's having the ability to get a chance to run through it, repetition, those core components of your story, those just need to be wrote and not even thought, so you can be a human when you're speaking to folks. That's the whole objective anyway.
That's good. I love that. Well, Dan, so normally I try to save last question, or try to take it a level deeper, and to wrap it up. But I got to be honest here. I feel like I've been asking these second level, third level questions of you that I feel I got a really strong clarity of what next steps are in regards to being able to make sales practical, the value of repetition, and being able to bring story into the sales process by asking questions and by being able to really understand where in the process the buyer is. So I guess the simplest way I can try to wrap it up is saying, is there anything else you would have to encourage our listeners in your experience, or the clients that you've worked with in the sales process, of being able to practically craft and tell your story?
Two things. First off, I'm going to get destroyed when my marketing team and my operations folks listen to this, because you gave me the opportunity to tell people, hey, how do I get in touch with SimTrain? And I didn't do that. I was so excited about telling you, what our customers get from SimTrain that I never said, hey, just shoot a note to info@SimTrain, and that's with a Y, SYMTRAIN.com, or go to simtrain.com and check us out. So that first, I want to start there.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, like anything else, right? It's almost like, the Allen Iverson, practice. Are we talking practice? Right? Is the ability to make an impact through repetition, through practice, is really important, right? And the impact is on you, the individual contributor, right? If I want to get good at something, I need to work at it, right? And I can work at my craft with customers. I can work at my craft with colleagues. I can work at my craft any way I choose, right? So even if you don't become a customer of SimTrain, I don't know why you wouldn't, but if you don't, just work at it, practice it, find ways to actually go out and get better at what you do, no matter what it is you do, right? If you're a professional seller, become really good at selling, right? If you're a janitor or a high school football coach, become really good at coaching. Work on your craft, not just on the game field or the practice field. Work on it on your own time too. Find ways to get better. I remember, one of the reasons SimTrain's so passionate for me is when we were starting frontline selling, I was the first person working on behalf of our customers and calling their prospects and trying to set appointments for them. Right. So what did I do? I got scared. I got nervous. I got anxious every day before I started that job. Right. So I'd pick up the phone and I'd call a friendly, voice, right? Someone I knew, and I'd instantly just jump into role play mode. I would start role playing with them. I would just work at what I was doing. And it would just people were like, what are you doing? I wouldn't even say, hey, can I role play with you? I would just jump right into role play mode and just go. And after a while, people would figure it out, and then I'd have to go to a new friendly voice, because the types of things that they were saying to me is like they were being mean to me to get me to stop being in role.
Yep. And
it just made me so much more comfortable that when I called a C-level executive at a Fortune 50 or Fortune 500 company on behalf of our clients, I already got beaten up earlier that day from one of my good friends or buddies that it just made my job easier. It just made life easier for me. So, do the types of things you need to do to be effective in whatever you're doing, work on them. Find the right way to work on them. And if you can, provide that to others so they can feel comfortable in what they're doing. I just think it's the type of thing, like even saying it to you right now, I kind of feel my chest like falling in a little. I feel more comfortable. It's like when you do things for other people, right? Like your story, it's about your customers, or when you're out looking to help, your colleagues or help people that work for you or help your customers, it just makes life better and easier, and it makes your job that much more enjoyable. I think from my perspective, that would be my parting words, in terms of, how to get value from your own journey and what you're doing.
That's awesome, man. I love that. I love that aspect of being able to become the master at what we're doing, and the value of repetition. It's been something that's been dear to my heart, and knowing both what we do here at Note of the Quo, as well as professionals I've hired to help train myself, and they've resonated with the same training of, you just got to get out there and do it. You got to get out there before you try picking up the phone and getting on with the customer. Get on with someone that you're not going to be as intimidated and scared by. So I think that's right on, and real practical advice that we can take today. So thank you for leaving us with that.
No, absolutely, Kyle, and thank you. I enjoyed talking to you. I think you're this podcast will do well because you're an easy guy to talk to for anyone coming to join you on the podcast.
I'm honored to hear that, man. Thank you for your time today. It's it really has been a privilege having you with us, being able to talk story, talk process, talk communication, and then what SimTrain is doing to be able to bring a greater level of sophistication and scalability to sales teams. So thank you for your time today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Hey, I want to thank you very much for joining us for this episode of Marketing from the Roosevelt Room. I know you have a lot of options on what podcasts you can listen to, so thank you sincerely for taking the time to join us for this one. If you have enjoyed this conversation, would love to keep it going in our Facebook group, Marketing from the Roosevelt Room with Kyle Willis. In that, we have live video, Q&A, and create more of a dialogue. Would love to keep the conversation going, so please join us on Facebook. Otherwise, look forward to catching you on our next episode. Have a great day.